Made it. It was a whirlwind, but we're back. Every Tuesday, I am shocked that I get here even close to on time. It's never an easy task for me.
Well, many Tuesdays, not this Tuesday, but many Tuesdays, we have the opportunity to schedule at a better time. Oh shit! Fuck me. This happens every week.
Redo. 3, 2, 1.
Start the whole thing over. Every Tuesday, except for this one, we pretty much have the ability to schedule slightly differently. You have a thing that, have you ever seen the Mike Birbiglia special where he talks about late people? Because you are that person. You are the person who he says, are you an early person? Because if you're an on-time person, you're a late person who has 1 minute. It's something along these lines. I'm butchering his joke, but
it's like,
you have 1 minute to be on time.
High school coach would use whatever he's saying, I'm sure.
Yeah, and then it's funny on that special. On that special, as he's telling that joke, some people walk into the theater late. It's great.
Let me take you through my Tuesday. Actually, so every time we talk about doing more podcasts, and I just kick that can down the road.
Sure.
It's generally because I'm pretty busy.
Sure.
My work schedule is kind of out of control. Historically, for those who know me, I don't work that hard.
Yeah. I mean, if you work with Alex and you're at the place where he's making his living presently, please don't say that to anyone else. But yes, that seems to be the case.
Well, the running joke is that I've never had a job, according to my friends in sports media, because I'm always around.
Sure.
But what all it really means is that I'm either a really good or really bad time manager, depending on how you look at it. Good in that I somehow make time for all the things that people need me for, and bad in that it's just a whirlwind getting to all those things. So my Tuesdays start with 7 a.m. meetings, which is not fun.
Yeah.
So I get up a little earlier than usual. On Tuesdays. And then I usually have a morning full of meetings. And there's one thing I do every week for myself, which is I do this
Wait, is this going to get us kicked off YouTube, Alex? Because this feels like a thing.
No, I do that.
Self-care.
I do that for myself as much as I need to. So I guess there's a couple things I do for myself every. So I do this lunchtime workout class at the Tacoma YMCA on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it's me and a bunch of old people, and I just do it every week. I mean, I'll work out other days throughout the week, but this class, it's like I don't have to think about it, because it's structured. They're telling you exactly what it's like a HIIT class, any kind of HIIT or workout class you would do. So I really enjoy that.
Of course, I know what you're talking about. Of course. Duh.
You being the athletic specimen you are, should know and be very familiar with this. But I do that, and then I basically race home after that class. If I have time, I will try to grab a sandwich or something beforehand. Today I hadn't eaten all day. A lot of times I'll do this class on Tuesday and Thursday without having eaten at all in the morning. And those are usually a little tougher. About halfway through the class, I start seeing spots a little bit. I'm like, just pull it back, man. Just pull it back so you don't faint in front of all these old people.
Yeah.
So I do that, and then I race home, grab some food if I have a chance, and then walk in the door, usually get handed a baby, and I'm like, hold this while I run to the bathrooms. My wife goes to the bathroom.
Sure.
And, then I come running in here to get on this camera with you. And this is I'm not going to say this is the best I can look. This is the best I can be under the circumstances.
Here's what I want you to know. You look exactly the way you look every episode. Whatever your beauty routine is on the other episodes, you're having the exact same effect on this episode.
We've talked about this before. It's like when I thought I had gained a ton of weight, and one of my close friends was like, "You've always looked the same to me." And it wasn't you look the same good, it's you look the same bad all the time. So I totally understand it. This is the reality of what we do here. We're just here for fun.
So speaking of which, the extra days of this podcast, we're going to have at least this week and hopefully next week podcasts coming out on Thursdays also. We have interviews scheduled for both, but we'll see what happens with those. You won't be on them. It'll be just me talking to somebody else. And maybe we'll, maybe that'll be the solution until either you lose your job for admitting you don't work hard on the internet, or
I said I historically don't work hard.
Yeah, of course. This is the one you turned it around on. Of course, the job that you have presently, where you've decided to do a weekly podcast in the middle of the day, is the one where you're you're really committing yourself to working hard. And tomorrow, hopefully. On Thursday, I'm interviewing Dan Viennes of the Seahawks Forever podcast. Tomorrow is the schedule. By the way, it's been on the schedule before, and it gave me food poisoning last time, so we'll see what type of horrible illness I get tomorrow to ruin this podcast scheduling. And then we have a special secret at this time. I don't want to reveal it until I actually have the interview in the can guest, and we're going to try to do these two types of podcasts somewhat often. That are probably just going to be me talking to people because Alex refuses to commit to your happiness, listener. And also
I really like this format because it does three things. One, I don't have to be a part of it, which is great for me and my time. Two, if it goes badly, it makes me look better. And three, if it goes well, it just enhances the entire brand. So
that's true.
I win no matter what. The pressure's really on you.
Yeah. And then next week we're gonna attempt something because I'm gonna be gone on Tuesday, so it's not gonna be a live episode on Tuesday. But our plan is to still release it on Tuesday, have it come out. It won't be as though it's live, but there's a feature on the app that we use where we can have it kind of release as a live episode, so you'll be able to watch it. It's not just like a YouTube premiere. You'll be able to watch it on all the platforms, I think, that you watch it on right now. We just won't necessarily be able to we won't be streaming it live because I will be at Disneyland with my child and one of my children and my wife. The other one's at the in-laws. It's gonna be quite an event. The
thing about this that surprised me when you told me you were going to Disneyland, which in and of itself is a huge commitment for anybody. Yes. Unless you have like Bezos money, Disneyland is going to be pricey for almost anybody in the world. But the thing that fascinated me was that you've never been to Disneyland. So this is your first time. That's
the impetus. I don't think that I'm going to like it, for the record. And I probably would have liked it as a kid. I don't think I'm going to like it. And what I'm going to enjoy is my daughter really likes the Disney stuff. And but neither my wife and I are like super into Disney in any way, but it's one of those things where you want to give your kids the shit that you couldn't have. And so in this case, we're going to go spend $5,000 so she can meet Belle and be scared to go on every ride. And, we'll get a couple pictures with her and it'll be cool, a good memory. She's finally old enough to make memories. That was kind of our commitment, is once she got old enough to make memories, we would take her on a cool vacation. Our original plan was Hawaii. For, I think, less money, we probably could have gone to Hawaii and had a better time for the adults. But now we have this other child who we're starting the clock over on, but we don't want to forget that this 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old, has, she's part of our life too. She's not just like Oliver Twist. If I don't even know if that's a good literary reference. So anyways, next week, it'll be a little clunky. We'll probably be behind on some stories. If you're like, oh, Shohei Ohtani got arrested for money laundering on Tuesday, we won't be talking about it. I'm sorry. But if nothing else happens, then we'll be fine. Did you hear? I heard a thing, by the way, speaking of, I think Disney, the Indiana Jones movie lost like $140 million, and $80 million of it was, they spent $80 million to de-age Harrison Ford. By the way, I saw this from a meme, so this could be a joke, but it was $80 million to digitally de-age Harrison Ford, which we spend a little over $40 million per episode to de-age us on this. So I don't.
The best we can do. So
yeah.
I can only imagine what they got out of it for 80.
Yeah. Okay. So did you watch that movie, by the way? I'm not into Indiana Jones movies at all.
No, I'm not an Indiana Jones guy, but as somebody who's about to head to Disneyland next week, I will say the Indiana Jones ride is great.
Okay.
It's great. I think you'll like that one. I think even a kid would find that one enjoyable. It's not like, terribly scary or anything like that.
Well, I'm scared of heights and I don't like being nauseous. And
there's no heights. It could make you nauseous, maybe.
Okay. No upside down. We're not going upside down at any point.
No upside downs. It's really it's like a Land Rover Safari Jeep type thing, just kind of like rattling along on a track. There is like one drop. I would say it's like a controlled drop, though. It's not like you're just plummeting down or anything like that. So But it's a pretty good ride. It's definitely one of the more popular ones there at Disneyland. I think you'll like it. Even if
we got one of those passes. My daughter's going to probably go on like 3 rides the whole time, and we got one of those passes that we can get to the front of the line too. So it's going to be this is a colossal money pit. Having a kid, period. This isn't even the half of it, by the way. This is one of the cheapest things you can do as a parent compared to having a child, period. But we should talk about sports, because I also have this other child needs some maintenance today, and I have a hard out at 2:50. So
I'm curious. Yeah, the last thing I'll say about Disneyland is that people who have been to Disneyland need to send you all the advice they possibly can. Because when you first told me that you had never been and your wife had never been, this was everybody's first time, I was like, oh, you better do a little bit of research. And I'm sure you have.
Yeah, we've done, we did a lot of research leading up to it, and then we've talked to various people who we are friends with that have gone a lot, but I would welcome anybody's advice. And especially, by the way, I'm happy to hear your advice if you went as a kid. I'm sure that all the racist rides you loved are probably gone. But if you've gone as an adult with children, that's where that is what the advice that I value the most. I'm also, by the way, I'm going to duck out mid Wednesday. Wednesday will be the first day we're actually spending time at the parks. And I'm going to duck out mid Wednesday and go to an Angels day game. So I don't even know who they're playing. I just know they have a day game, and the tickets are like $3 a piece. So we're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, it's a lovely stadium.
Okay. We actually have a fair amount to talk about, despite the NFL news seems to have mostly cooled down a little bit, but Major League Baseball started. And by the way, you and I made a mistake. This is why this podcast is struggling, is you and I are very bad at planning. If we were going to use the planning of this podcast as evidence for your time management being good, I think you would lose the case, because
I'm basically beholden to a Google Calendar. And we don't operate on that, so
we maybe should, actually. That wouldn't be bad, but we didn't even talk about opening day at all last week, which I'm sure people noticed that listen to the podcast. We didn't make predictions, and so we decided to make predictions. We made them. I will say this in our defense, because I realized it on Thursday before the games had started. We had not made predictions. We made them before. There might have been a game going on, but it was at least before the Mariners started their. Wait, was the Mariners first game on Thursday or Friday? I lose track.
It was on Thursday. I'm pretty sure we either made these right after the first game, and as soon as I made my win-loss prediction, I was like, God, they're already 0-1. This is a terrible prediction. I'm already one game down.
But we made it at Thursday, 2:26 p.m. I have it on my screen here.
Okay, so we made it ahead of time. We made it ahead of the game.
Yeah.
And then they went out and promptly lost after we made our predictions. But in general, I mean, I would just say, like, this year, man, it feels like the optimism around the Mariners that usually comes with the start of a season is just very muted. I was surprised, because even on opening day there were still tickets available. Ultimately, they announced the sellout, but usually all that means is the team, quote unquote, bought up the rest of the tickets.
Sure.
So they could say that. There was clearly some empty seats there on opening day. And then the weekend series, I mean, you're talking about a weekend series against the Boston Red Sox, which usually is very close to a sellout because you have a lot of Boston fans and obviously a lot of early season Mariner fans who are there. There just weren't that many people at these games Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So not that the Mariners don't deserve this lack of optimism from people, the way that things have gone over the past few seasons. But it was just surprising to see, because typically early in the year, the Mariners do a pretty good job drawing fans, especially against a team like Boston.
Sure. So, yeah, and I want to say I heard, like, the average attendance was down like 18,000 or something like that compared to last year's first 3 games at home, and that was against Cleveland, if I recall correctly. Like, yeah, it's not looking great for the Mariners fan enthusiasm. And like you said, I mean, this offseason they've done themselves no favors, and I will say, like, I'm a little less sensitive to not spending money. That's not really the way that I think a good team is built, is just on, especially if you're not a team like the Dodgers or the Yankees who can just go out and spend indiscriminately. And I understand, I'm so sick of this fucking argument that it's not my money. Of course it's not my money, but there is a budget, and I'd like to see the Mariners get the most they can out of that budget. And they've historically actually run relatively high payrolls. And but this offseason, like rhetorically, they were terrible. Jerry DiPoto did the team really. He did a real disservice to the team with his 54% comments, and I think that resonated with fans more than just about anything that I've seen an owner say, or a not an owner say, but an executive say, and maybe my whole life. I've never seen people respond so negatively to something that an executive says.
Yeah, it definitely, and we talked about this either last week or the week before as well, but just from like a PR standpoint, the Mariners just had a rough offseason. You know, it starts with DiPoto kind of running his mouth right after the season's over, and fans are disappointed because that team was expected to go to the playoffs, and they didn't. You know, we talked about kind of the sequence of events that took place from there. I feel like they actually had a pretty okay offseason. You know, their initial signings up front were not great. Their initial acquisitions were pretty poor, but as the offseason wore on, things got better. I feel like they made moves that actually make them a pretty good offensive team compared to what they were last season. I know, you know, they bring in Mitch Garver to be their DH. He hasn't really played a whole lot early on. He had some back spasm or something that wasn't too concerning of an injury, but something that sidelined him for a couple games already. But he's a pro hitter. I mean, he's a good hitter that can stabilize the middle of the lineup. They bring back Mitch Haniger, he had a great spring, and he's already had a pretty solid start to the year. So, you know, they brought in some bats that lengthened this lineup. Their opening day lineup, they have Ty France batting 8th. You know, last year they were throwing Ty France into the middle of the order, you know, most of the time, 2, 3, 4. And as the season wore on and he kind of faded, they moved him down. But they certainly made their lineup a little better. When we get to the predictions in a minute, that'll hopefully reflect that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, from a PR standpoint, they did such a bad job just navigating this offseason that it's understandable why a lot of fans would be just overall disappointed. And I think it can be a little misleading because, you know, I know you and I are probably among the people that follow closely a lot of Mariners related accounts on social media, whether it's, you know, local bloggers or people who have podcasts that like to talk about the Mariners or even just big fans. And so, you know, there is a segment of fans that will always find a way to put an optimistic spin on every single move the Mariners make. You know, when the Mariners acquired Luis Arias, who I think is terrible and who has so far played terribly, there were people that were defending the move. Now, Luis Arias a few years ago was a huge prospect. He came up as a big prospect with the Padres. He had an okay season in Milwaukee. He kind of bounced over to Boston for a year, and now he's here. But he's a former prospect, and by all accounts, you know, depending on how you define a failed prospect, you could classify him as that because he certainly hasn't established himself as a star, let alone a consistent starter, let alone an everyday player. And now here he is being given a huge responsibility by the Mariners as effectively a starting third baseman, or at least half of a starting third baseman if you throw in Josh Rojas. So some of the moves they made were certainly questionable, and there are certain people out there that will always defend some of these moves. But, you know, some of the other, it's like it always feels like they're kind of shuffling the deck with what they have here. You bring in a couple guys like Haniger and Mitch Garver that I do think make this team better. You also fail to address a need in third base, and that could ultimately be a problem, and so far has been. So, man, it's going to be an interesting season, but as of this moment, they're 3-2. So, you know, that's a little better than it is worse for sure.
I want to defend the Urias trade for a minute because I think that I think you and I disagree on this, and I'm not someone who's historically like super optimistic about the Mariners. This dude is a year removed from 2 straight years of 2 Fangraphs wins above replacement seasons where he was 10% better than the average hitter. Like, this dude is like, he's certainly never reached the status as a prospect that some people thought he might reach. But so the dude they traded for him, Isaiah Campbell, it was interesting because he pitched against the Mariners and he looked pretty good. I mean, he had a pretty good season last year, but like you watch the stuff and it's like, oh man, this guy's got like an interesting, that breaking ball that he throws is formidable. And but you know, I think the one thing the Mariners are good at is finding high leverage relievers off essentially the scrap heap. So
Yeah,
not to say they gave up nothing for him, but the cost for Urias was not high.
yeah, and for me, it's not even about the cost of what they gave up to get a guy like Arias. I mean, Isaiah Campbell, you have not to knock Isaiah Campbell, but you have plenty of guys like that. The Mariners have been great at finding those guys. So what they gave up to acquire Arias is, it's negligible. The bigger issue is giving him effectively a starting role. When there were other guys out there available at the time who could capably play third base. I mean, the biggest problem with Luis Arias right now is that he cannot throw the baseball across the diamond,
sure,
which is an important thing for a third baseman.
Presumably that's something that they were not aware of or was not even the case when they made the trade for him.
Yeah, and I guess my problem with the Mariners and the way that they've acquired hitters is that they seem to become enamored with guys who have some sort of pedigree, whether it's current pedigree or guys who had it in the past. And Luis Arias, like I said, a few years back, he was a really big prospect. That kind of thing, I mean, that'll carry you a lot longer in a career than people will often think. Just guys who were former first-round picks, they bounce around baseball for a lot longer than a guy who was selected much later on, right? And a few years ago, I noticed this with the Rainiers. The Mariners, and I've tweeted about this many times, but they had this they fell in love with guys from the 2014 MLB draft that were selected in the first round. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if they all really scouted that draft hard or what it was. But if you go back and look at the Rainiers rosters over the past few years, or just go and look at Wikipedia and look at the list of the 2014 MLB draft first rounders, the Mariners have employed a great deal of them either in their minor league org or even on their major league roster. And it's just funny because a lot of these guys never amounted to much, but they kept giving them opportunities much later in their careers than maybe they should have. And I'm not exactly sure what it is. They do a pretty good job scouting pitchers, but man, when it comes to scouting hitters, it's almost like they're just resting on what they remember about a guy from a few years ago. And that seems to be problematic at times.
Yeah. I mean, I'll still argue that I don't think they invested in Urias thinking he'd be the guy that he was. I think that the guy he was 2 years ago now, so not last year with the Red Sox, and the guy he was the year before that is who they hope they'll get. And the investment is basically zero. But we should get to these predictions because these are the things we predicted, by the way. And do you have this up on your phone, by the way? This, if you want to, because I'll let you say yours.
Go ahead and read yours out first.
Well, yeah, so the things that we predicted were the Mariners wins for 2024, the World Series matchup, who would win the World Series, who would win both the AL and NL MVP, Cy Young, and Rookie of the Year. And I'm going to go down mine, and we might be able to alternate. For the Mariners wins, I guessed 89 wins, which would probably not be good enough to make the playoffs, by the way.
Yeah, 89 is, I think the Vegas over-under, if you were betting on it, was, I believe, 87.5. So you're basically going chalk.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm gonna push it a little bit in one way or the other. I actually think that they are a bit better than that. I said 91 wins, which should, I would think, be good enough to get into the playoffs. I do think this is a playoff team, even for some of the problems that we give them a hard time about, because you would have to think that even with their budget as tight as it is, with having some flexibility on this roster to fill some gaps, if they can just stay afloat for a month or two, it'll put some pressure on the organization to go out and acquire a couple guys to fill some of the gaps they have. So I think they should theoretically get a little bit better as the season goes along.
Yeah, and I think I'm I'm kind of with you. My 89 is if you get the 50th percentile outcome combined between Josh Rojas, Luis Arias, Jorge Polanco, the additions that they did make, Mitch Garber, Mitch Haniger, if you get, and the 50th percentile outcome for a guy like Mitch Haniger is probably 110 games of pretty good baseball. If you get anything better than that, we're getting into the territory of playoffs are pretty realistic. And so I don't think it's that far above what you'd expect. And I also, I agree. They could potentially add some stuff. Now, you and I had, I think, a pretty boring, I actually probably would have picked the exact thing you picked for your World Series. And I decided for the sake of this that I was not going to pick it, but we were pretty alike on our World Series predictions. I picked Tampa Bay versus Atlanta because these are two teams that I have money on, first off, so I'm rooting for my money. Also, Fangraphs thinks that, because I'm a big wisdom of the crowd, the lines are a pretty good predictor of what's going to happen guy. But the Fangraphs playoff odds have Tampa Bay and Atlanta. Actually, we talked about this, but they're like outpacing their betting lines. They disagree with the betting lines more than any other teams in the favor of those teams winning the World Series. And so I think there's something there. I think there's something to that. And to me, those are the two teams that make the most sense. And I have Atlanta winning the World Series.
Yeah, I said Houston and Atlanta. For me, it was like the reverse jinx theory. I don't want Houston to be there, but maybe if I say they'll be there, they won't. And that's the important part here. So, but obviously Houston has been good for a number of years now, and the likelihood of them getting back there is as good as it is for any other AL team. With Atlanta, I mean, the Dodgers are obviously going to be the favorite because of how they went out and spent money, but how often do you see those teams that just spent a ton of money win in that first year? I mean, there's more stories about how those teams failed at some point than ended up winning. Atlanta seems to have the recipe. I mean, they're a team that's been clicking for the past few years. They have a good mix of homegrown talent and really have a ton of weaknesses. They got Jared Kelenic batting ninth, for God's sake. I mean, this is a guy that the Mariners were trying to throw into the middle or top of their order at times, and they're throwing him at the very, very bottom, and they have the ability to be flexible. I'm not sure that the Dodgers have spent so much freaking money that it's hard to say if they have any more money to go acquire more people. Like if they do, it costs them about 10 times more than it actually costs on paper because they're paying luxury tax threshold. So
yeah, well, and
you would have to think their flexibility is low.
I saw that the top Japanese free agent next year plans on signing with the Dodgers, or at least there's reports of that. This is Mary Jo Benson Gresh is says Phillies in the World Series. Mary Jo is she's my aunt, but it's like complicated. I have a complicated family, so she's like what would you call that? Technically my uncle's ex-wife, but still in good standing with the family. Anyway, also the Kelenic thing, the early season reactions to baseball might be the most annoying thing I've ever experienced as a baseball fan or as a sports fan, because Mariners fans are so blindly optimistic, and it'll be like I saw literally halfway through game 1 of the season, people are ready to write it off, blow the whole thing up, and it's like I mean, it's that Tommy Lasorda quote, which is, it's like you win a third of your games, you lose a third of your games, whatever you do with the rest is what really matters. That every team in baseball is going to lose 60 games this year. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy that people react that way. And also Jared Kelenic goes out, has a good opening series with the Braves. Have we never seen this guy have a good start to a season before? Have we never
started great? I mean, he had that
exactly
run
my point. Exactly my point.
Faded down the stretch. I think the Braves are probably better equipped to utilize him in a way that makes sense. You know, last year the Mariners just started running out there all the time, and we've seen that doesn't work for him, or at least it hasn't historically. So, and plus there's just more professionals around him in Atlanta. I mean, there's guys who have been there and done it. So you have to think that that'll help him too. And you're right, though. I mean, the Mariner fans, it is funny to me because Mariner fans in general are just very, very reactive. And I'm not absolving myself of that. There are times where I'm joking around about the Mariners, but the stuff that they do frustrates me. And then I have to kind of take a step back and be like, this is one fraction of one game of 162.
Sure.
The optimism, though, it does seem, I don't know if this is commonplace among most fan bases, but it always feels to me like a majority of Mariner fans like never grew up playing any sort of competitive sport. I don't know if that's accurate. Doesn't it feel that way though? Like you have so many Mariner fans that are like, not only did you not like play baseball or softball to some degree, but like you probably spent most of your life indoors and now you decided you're a Mariners fan, which is fine. I mean, that's great. That's great that you found something that you like, but the understanding of what's good and what's bad in baseball is off. It feels like it's often lost on Mariner fans, and that makes it very complicated because if you're reactive and also don't have like a great understanding of what's going on in front of you, it's going to lead to some very emotional outbursts at times, whether good or bad.
Yeah, it's always. I have a friend who was reacting this way, and I used to, for years, I've just called him Chicken Little at the beginning of every, which is the sky is falling at every moment of his life as a Mariners fan, which I understand. I guess you just eventually you gotta not have that level of emotion, and for a person like that, I recommend be a football fan. You could do this one day a week. You know what I mean? You can't do this 162 times a year. It's not an enjoy. You're losing. You are losing as a fan if this is your feeling while you're watching sports. Okay, let's do AL MVP and AL Cy Young. Because these two, while I predicted the Mariners were going to win 89 games, my original prediction was 2 Mariners for these spots, which were Julio and Luis Castillo. I changed my AL MVP to Juan Soto. One, I don't think the Mariners are going to have the AL MVP and the AL Cy Young and also miss the playoffs. So I think that my predictions were contradictory. 2, I think Castillo is one of the best pitchers in baseball. And I think that Julio is a very, very, very good player who has potential to vault himself up to being one of the best players in baseball, but isn't necessarily at that spot yet. And I think Juan Soto, Yankee Stadium, East Coast bias, if I'm just predicting who's it going to be, I think Juan Soto has a good chance to be the MVP. And he started the year off pretty hot, by the way, which I didn't know that when we did this. Like I said, we made these predictions in advance, but...
Yeah, he's going to take advantage of the short porch in right field in Yankee Stadium. He obviously has some protection in the lineup, which was harder to come by when he was in San Diego and obviously in Washington as well. I think he's going to have a really good year. Yes, if he stays healthy, that could be a great pick for MVP. I went with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I just feel like he's been kind of on the rise the last few years. Obviously, came into the league with a huge pedigree and has always been pretty good. But last year, I mean, he really had I would say a step forward, and he feels like because of his size, he's one of those guys that's going to like burn fast. He's going to be a supernova. I think he's going to hit his prime and maybe tail off a little bit quicker than a lot
maybe
of
guys. Maybe like a Prince Fielder, Cecil Fielder type of guy.
Yeah, like a Prince Fielder or, some of those other guys historically that have been on the bigger side. But his body, unless he really starts to condition and maybe slim down a little bit, I think it'll be tough to carry a lot of this production over into his mid-30s. But for now, at least, he's been a great player. He always hits, and I think he has a chance to win an MVP. And if it's not now, then when's it going to be? And then for Cy Young, I like your pick of Luis Castillo. I feel like Luis, he has a lot of starts like he did on opening day, where as you're watching the game play out, you're like, man, it's not that bad. I mean, his stuff is so good. Luis's stuff is as good as any pitcher in baseball. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the arsenal he has, his fastball. But, man, every now and then, and it's like this is kind of the same thing we've seen happen in the past with him ever since he's been a Mariner. He'll just kind of get, like, hit around, and at the end of the day, you look at the line, and you're like, that wasn't as good of a line as I thought. It didn't turn out to be a quality start, or he had a lot of strikeouts, but he gave up a few runs, or there were a couple big hits in there. He seems to give up some home runs from time to time. So I just feel like the consistency there can be lacking. When he's dialed, though, I mean, you're right. He's one of the best in baseball. This is another one where I almost am kind of going with the reverse jinx theory. I went with Framber Valdez, Houston's ace. Framber is a hothead. He has some personality control issues, I would say, when he's on the mound. But he's been as dominant a pitcher as there's been in the AL in the last few years. He goes out there and he finds a way to both be efficient and also somehow still strike guys out, which is hard to do. I feel like most strikeout pitchers, they get into the 5th or 6th inning and their pitch count's getting up there. Framber Valdez gets into the 7th or the 8th routinely and yet is still striking guys out. He's got a nasty curveball, so you already know the Mariners are going to struggle with him because they cannot hit a curveball. But he's just got a good arsenal overall. I feel like he's another guy, kind of like Luis, where it's like he's going to win. He's probably going to win a Cy Young at some point, but when's it going to be? So why not now?
Yeah. Okay. National League. Yeah, I do kind of feel that. I feel like it's inevitable at some point he will, but it's possible he just never puts together that season. I'm sure there's pitchers like this. I would be interested to see who are the best pitchers to never. Well, the best pitcher to never win a Cy Young is probably Nolan Ryan, actually, which seems amazing that he never won a Cy Young, but he just walked everybody. He walked so many batters. Okay, so National League MVP Cy Young. You went, I believe, the chalk on your MVP selection. I took Mookie Betts, who I think it's amazing to imagine Mookie. I mean, you want to talk about all-time franchise mistakes. Mookie Betts has turned into one of the best players in baseball since leaving Boston, and has been. I think I saw a graphic. I think it was Mookie Betts that it was like him compared to Mike Trout over like a somewhat contemporary stretch of like 8 years, and he holds up against Mike Trout in just about every category except for on base percentage and slugging, and that's my guy.
Mookie's interesting because when he came up with Boston, he comes up as a second baseman. He's very undersized. I mean, if you look at him, you would be shocked to know that he has the power that he does because he's a smaller dude, just in all facets. He's not very tall. He's slight of frame, but he can really hit the crap out of a baseball. He comes up as a second baseman. He's not the biggest prospect in the world. You know, he's kind of like a mid-level prospect in a way. And they shift him to the outfield. So you're dealing with a lot of stuff right off the bat if you're Mookie Betts. You're getting a position change. Again, you don't have the same pedigree that some of the top prospects have. And he's done nothing but perform ever since he's been in the major leagues. And then he goes to Los Angeles. And, you know, part of the reason why the Red Sox let him go is they think, you know, all the things I just mentioned. He's a lot of guys who are smaller frame, smaller guys overall, as age takes a toll on them. You see this with pitchers all the time. Their bodies wear down, and that has
Big
not
frame,
been the case at
small
all.
frame. You're gonna be fucked. You got to be just right.
Yeah, there's like this sweet spot. It's like the Julio Rodriguez sweet spot. But he's continued to perform well, obviously, and he keeps getting moved around. They keep playing him at different positions. They played him at shortstop. They played him at second. They keep him in the outfield. I mean, he's
that's why I think That's why I think he's got a real good chance to win the MVP. Not only because he's playing shortstop this year, and shortstop has a different positional adjustment for stuff like wins above replacement, and I think everybody kind of does that positional adjustment in their mind. Like that, it's an intuitive thing that we can quantify a little bit with analytics. You can feel however you want about analytics. We know it's more valuable. 50 home runs from a shortstop are more valuable than 50 home runs from a DH or a first baseman. We know that.
Well, and a lot of times when you see guys make a positional shift, it's to a weaker position, right?
Yes.
Especially as they get older. I mean, they're
Yes.
moving off shortstop or center field to a corner spot. To shift at his age from the outfield where he's primarily played to shortstop is like unheard of. So he's going to get the benefit of the doubt if he even plays, you know, somewhat of a competent shortstop because of just the unprecedented nature of making this
People
move at this
will
point in his
love the
career.
narrative of a dude that's so willing to do what it takes to win that he'll go play out of position to help the team, even though they have Gavin Lux. And I mean, but frankly, like that's, you know, I'm not like the devout Ichiro fan that a lot of people are. And one of the biggest things was like that dude would have been so much more valuable to the Mariners if he played center field. Yeah, and it's not only the positional adjustment, but it's also like power hitting corner outfielders are easier to find than power hitting center fielders, and especially guys that can also field. And especially at that time, the Mariners' offense was anemic.
Oh, you're right. I mean, just the willingness of a Major League Baseball player at this stage of his Major League career to be able to agree to positional switches like that. That's, you know, on paper, it sounds like it should be an easy thing to do. But I mean, think about it. For those of us who are not Major League Baseball players, I mean, just think of the job you do. And if somebody came to you and said, hey, we want to switch your role, you know, we just want to move you to a completely different job from something else that you're doing right now. I mean, you'd at least have to think about it, right? Like, and a lot of times you might not even be thrilled about it. Now think about if you're the best person at your position at work and they're asking you to switch to another position, because that's basically what Mookie Betts was. He's an all-star outfielder and they're asking him to switch to shortstop and he's willing to do it. I mean, that says a lot about him, and you're right. That narrative is going to go a long way. And I think, in some ways now I wish I'd picked him for MVP, but I didn't. I picked Ronald Acuna Jr. with Atlanta. Again, I think Atlanta's going to have a good year, and Acuna is, you know, he's their Julio. He's the engine that makes them go. Yeah. And he's another guy that it just feels like he's supposed to be a superstar. He has been a superstar already, and this is his chance to kind of take it to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, I have nothing to add. Ronald Acuna is great and has been great, and will probably continue to be great. He's his 2023 season, he was worth 8.4 wins above replacement.
Yeah.
and he's 26 years old and probably getting stronger and not losing a ton of speed. 41 home runs and 73 stolen bases.
Yeah, I mean he makes 40-40 look silly. I mean he eclipsed it so bad. It's just like when you're putting up numbers like that, how do you not win an MVP? So I think he's another guy, and you can say this about everybody who's ever been a superstar in this league. But as long as he stays healthy, I mean he's going to put up ridiculous numbers. Yeah. We didn't say our Cy Young awards for the NL. I'll go with mine first. I went with the dude in Logan Webb, who a lot of people probably don't know Logan Webb. He's the ace of the Giants staff. He's been a workhorse the past few years. He's another guy, kind of like Framber Valdez, that's pretty efficient, but also a strikeout guy. So he'll get you into the 7th or the 8th in his starts, but also get a lot of punch outs along the way because he's got a filthy arsenal. The Giants made a ton of strides this offseason. They probably had one of the best off seasons of any of the teams in baseball. They should be an immediate playoff contender, if not more than that. So the fact that he's their staff ace has been good on some lesser Giants teams over the past few years makes me think that if he just kind of keeps doing what he's doing, he should get some more wins under his belt this year with a better team around him, and that gives him a good shot at the Cy Young.
Yeah, I took Aaron Nola. I don't really have a good reason apart from I like Aaron Nola. He's probably towards the end of the prime of his career. He's gotten Cy Young votes 3 years of his career. It's not. I didn't put a lot of thought into it. I think Aaron Nola is a good pitcher, underappreciated pitcher, and he got shelled his first outing. So this is how you really know. I could have easily changed this to somebody more viable after week 1, but I'm sticking with Aaron Nola because we have no choice. We have integrity. And then I'll go both rookies of the year. I picked Jackson Holliday and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. This is I think Major League Baseball Rookie of the Year is probably the least interesting Rookie of the Year of any of the sports because so often it's a guy that came up and played 90 games and played well, but played 90 games, or it'll be like some uber prospect loses to a guy that came up and played 140 games. It was just okay, but was on a playoff team or something like that. It's very arbitrary if it actually represents the best rookie or if it's like the guy who was around the longest and accumulated the most stats for a season.
Yeah, I mean, Rookie of the Year is always a deep cut, so a lot of people might not know these guys. But I think the two you picked are kind of the chalk picks, or at least they were in the offseason. Holliday, he's the son of Matt Holliday. He's expected to be a great shortstop. Unfortunately for you, he's starting the year in AAA, so sure. I don't think he'll be down there for long, so he'll probably come up and produce right away. And Yamamoto obviously was one of the big offseason signings out of Japan. He also got rocked in his first start, though. So
sure, yeah. We have a lot of integrity here, which is the way of saying we are bad at this and admit to it.
I agree with you though. To some degree, the Rookie of the Year pick in Major League Baseball, at least at the start of the season, feels kind of like the Heisman Trophy, where it's almost predetermined by people ahead of time, and it's like they give you the A on the first day, and all you can do is lose it from there. It feels like they kind of have anointed Holliday and Yamamoto, and all they can do is potentially blow it from this point forward. But knowing all that, I actually went with the two people in both leagues I think might produce the best. Whether they actually are able to outpace the guys who people think might have won it, before the season began is one thing. But the AL guy I picked was Wyatt Langford. Wyatt Langford's kind of an interesting story. He's in Texas with the Rangers. He played no minor league baseball last year. He got drafted last season out of the University of Florida. He was expected to be in the minor leagues this year, and he had an amazing spring and made the team out of camp, and they've given him a starting outfield position. So it's pretty unprecedented in that I was reading some stats or, some factoids about all this. And I don't think there's never been a player with less minor league experience that went and won a job like that, a starting job with a World Series champ. It's kind of a deep cut, but it's one of those things where when
you're putting a lot of filters on this stat.
When you see a guy make a team like this without really any minor league service time, it's usually a bad team, right? Like Ken Griffey comes up with, even he's 19.
Perennially bad Mariners teams. You don't even have to say what year he came up. That was a time when it didn't matter.
Right. John Olerud did it in 89 or 90, and he was basically straight out of Wazoo. He made the Toronto Blue Jays, and they weren't particularly great at the time, but became good. But
the only other thing you'll see somewhat often is relievers. Guys that get drafted as relievers will come up pretty early, like pitchers, college relievers specifically tend to
Yeah,
by the way, that's a pretty good hint at who our other guest, our next week's Thursday guest could be if he decides to actually do the podcast. But I'm not going to admit to anyone who it's going to be because I don't want to be embarrassed when he cancels.
Yeah, that's a hell of a sell right there. So the guy I picked, Wyatt Langford, he's starting for Texas. Obviously, Texas is a very good team, very good lineup. We know that. And so I feel like this guy's, as long as he can hold on to that starting job, he should put up decent numbers because he's got a great lineup around him. And then the NL guy, I went with another guy I don't think a lot of people know a ton about, Jung-Hoo Lee, who's in San Francisco. He came across, he's 25 years old. So, a lot of times when you see these guys come from either the KBO in Korea or Japanese baseball, they're either towards the
NPB,
end of their
right? Why did
NPB.
you skip the... Wow.
Oh, the league. Sorry, NPB.
Jeez.
Yes.
Some sort of
KBO,
anti-Japanese bias.
But usually when you see these guys come over, they're either like past their prime, they're pitchers that are like 31, 32, that have kind of, they've kicked around and their contracts have expired in those leagues and now they're here. Or they're like, uber superstars like Shohei Ohtani that everyone kind of knows about. Jung-Hoo Lee, a lot of people probably don't know as much about. He's 25 and then came over from KBO. But he's starting, I believe, in center field for the Giants. And like I said, kind of similar to the Logan Webb pick for Cy Young, the Giants just made so many improvements this year that as long as this guy holds on to his starting job, he's going to produce for this team. Sure. And right now they believe they have him up towards the top of their lineup as well. So another guy, I think, it's always tough to pick against a big name like Yoshinobu Yamamoto pitching for the Dodgers, but this is a guy that plays every day. So I think that should at least keep him in the forefront of people's minds as the season wears on.
Yeah, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, big name in terms of gravitas, and also a lot of letters in that fucking name.
It's a long name. It's a tough one to spit out. Yeah.
Okay, the NCAA tournament. Let's move on to that because we just went through a long list. We did a bracket challenge, Alex. You started a bracket challenge because you thought it would be so hilarious for Casey McLean, this absolute rube, to fill out a bracket and let's see how this idiot does in a bracket challenge. Also, my dog is losing her mind downstairs. It'll be so fun to watch this moron. And guess who? Going into the Final Four, we don't even have to play the games, folks. The champion has been crowned. The champion of the Poor Sports Bracket Challenge is none other than Casey McLean.
It is pretty wild that it's wild that we haven't even played the Final Four yet. And you've already won the damn competition. Like,
I know.
Usually it at least comes down to like, you got to get the two champions right, and then you might be guaranteed. This is the last couple of years. This is how bracket pools have gone. Last year was complete chaos because Purdue got bounced right away, and that was, for a lot of people, that was their champion pick. They were a 1 seed. Anytime a 1 seed goes out very early, it kind of throws the entire bracket into chaos. And this year was kind of more of the same, even though that there weren't any like real early exits. A lot of the favorites kind of saw their way out, this last weekend. So congratulations to you, I guess. I don't know. The real losers are the listeners who joined this thinking that they might get some freebies out of it, and now they get nothing. And I know you said, you'd still throw a bone to second place or whatever. I don't think you should. If these people can't beat you, they don't deserve anything. That
means that nobody in our league deserves. I gotta go. I'm gonna have to go scream at my dog in a moment. I beat. It's so decisive. I'm playing in a league where I can win some money, and if Duke had won, if Duke beat NC State, it would be over there. Also, I presently have like a 95.6% chance of winning. It's only if NC State has to win, and then I can't remember what the other outcome has to be. It's got to be like UConn loses, and anyways,
is your champion UConn?
Yeah.
Okay, so it is interesting that at the end of the day you went with chalk with your champion pick because they were the number 1 overall seed. But even the fact that you did that and have already locked it up in at least one pool is impressive.
Well, I mean, 25% of people in ESPN pools, but also in our league, and especially that one and the one that I'm playing in, that's got like 65 people, that I'll win. Like if I win it, I win like $430 or something like that, which is pretty nice.
That's no joke. That's good.
Yeah. Which I'm gonna get taken down like New Heisel at some point, but. Wow, we're gonna have to pause. I'm gonna have to go scream at my dog. Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead. Because I want to talk a little bit about NC State, because it just feels like there has to be some sort of conspiracy theory on NC State. Everybody I know that doesn't watch any college basketball somehow had NC State going far. And I don't know. Look, I'm in a lot of ESPN brackets, and on ESPN, this is my theory on NC State. They put all the logos next to the team names. The logos are there for all of these college basketball teams. And most of them are just kind of standard, a couple letters or whatever. But NC State, for whatever reason, they use their Disney-like cartoonish wolf as their logo for NC State. And I think people gravitated towards the cartoonish NC State logo, and that's why they all picked NC State going forward. Because if you are one of those people that watches no college basketball or has no interest in the sport, a lot of times you just pick off color or off logo or off name. And because the NC State logo, at least on the ESPN bracket pool, looks so much different from all the other logos, I can see how it might be attractive to people. But everybody I know who doesn't watch much college basketball, for whatever reason, at NC State doing stuff. And if you watch, the NC State story is wild, because about 2 weeks before the regular season comes to an end, they're on the verge of firing their basketball coach. He's about to be. They were basically the Washington Huskies at that point. They were playing terrible basketball. They're not anywhere near the top of the ACC, top of their conference, and they're just kind of like limping their way to the finish line. And then something happens. It's like, I don't know if this dude convinced the rest of his team that he was going to get canned and they were all not going to cash their NIL checks or whatever the hell was going on. But something happened, because they flipped a switch and not only went on this incredible run, winning the ACC tournament, making the NCAA tournament with that automatic bid, and now just like steamrolling their way through the NCAA tournament. Something happened with this team, and somehow, like, people who know nothing about college basketball foresaw this happening. It's just a wild story.
What tier of college basketball program would you put NC State at? And not just for this season, but like if you put like the Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Connecticut, maybe Purdue, and probably not Purdue, I think would be like your very top tier. And then like the Purdues, and maybe like at this point, like, I don't know, is Indiana still in that group? Like, how far down the list are they? Because obviously NC State has some history in college basketball. This isn't their first unexpected deep run into the NCAA tournament. But because we have three competing things that are my theories that are kind of come to fruition with this, which is left-handed basketball players. DJ Burns is a left-handed basketball player who doesn't fit anything about modern basketball, right? He's a pretty big, thick, slow-moving dude who isn't running the floor, who isn't shooting from the outside on a regular basis. But he's left-handed.
Yeah, he's a traditional post player for sure.
Yeah, he's he's almost like an 80s 4, because he's like, even in I think he's like, his body type is I saw the comparisons to Zach Randolph, which I think Zach Randolph was a little bit better shooter. But also Zach Randolph, even though Zach Randolph was considered, I think, a little bit overweight for his time, I think body type wise was significantly leaner than DJ Burns.
He was. And Zach Randolph, we've talked about this before with people like you and me, but Zach Randolph suffered from fat face, what I call fat face syndrome, where his face was so chunky that it made you think the rest of his body was like heavily overweight. And he was a little bit bigger than your average NBA player for sure, but his face just made him look so much larger than he actually was. You're right. He was a better shooter. He was leaner than Burns. Burns is a big dude, just overall big. And to address your first question, I mean, NC State, to me, I know they have 2 championships, but they're like Washington. They're like the University of Washington, where they're kind of like this middle of the pack in their conference team year after year, and occasionally they'll pop and make a tourney like they did this year. But even when they made this tourney, there was nothing expected of them. They were an 11 seed. They're effectively one of the last teams into the tournament, and they only got in there because they won their conference tourney. So, they weren't getting an at-large bid, which you could say about most Washington teams. And, while they have had good runs and sustained success at different points in their history, over the last 20 or 30 years or so, they've been very similar to a team like Washington. So, their run this year to me is reminiscent of Oregon State a couple years ago, where Oregon State kind of goes on this miracle run at the end of their season. They win an at-large bid by winning the Pac-12, and they make it all the way to the Final Four, I believe. They fizzle out there eventually, but just the fact that they even got there is remarkable. Their coach gets an extension out of it. Turns out to be a terrible extension because Oregon State has been just horrifically awful ever since. Maybe that'll happen to NC State too. We don't know. But it's always fun. I mean, that's kind of the fun part of the tournament, is just seeing these teams pop out of nowhere that you never expected to get there and take down some of these big squads. And now, going up against Purdue, who's obviously one of the best teams in the tournament left, it's going to be a fun matchup because you get this big dude in DJ Burns, who's only, he's undersized height wise for a true post player at this level.
Look for a 4 maybe, or for a 5 maybe, but not not in modern basketball for sure. And
well, I mean, he's 6'9". Most guys at the college level these days who are that size are either like athletic, like rim protectors who can really jump, or they're stretch fours who are stepping out like a Zach Randolph and shooting a 3. But he's not that. He's more of a traditional post, and he's going against another traditional post in Zach Edey. The difference is obviously Zach Edey's 7'4". So these two are kind of, it's like King Kong versus Godzilla. I mean, I would have to imagine they're just going to just abuse each other in the post.
By the way, that's got to be the least sensitive. It's not intentionally insensitive, but you compare the guy who's like part Asian to Godzilla, and oh my God, you are, and the other guy that I'm not even going to bring it up. You are. You're really stepping in it today, Alex. You're really stepping in it.
It's a clash of the Titans, and the fact they play a similar style.
It is interesting to me because the modern NBA game is this kind of positionless basketball, which if we're looking at like where that starts or where it became popular, it's typically at like smaller college programs where you can't recruit a 6'10" power forward every year. So you build the offense around, maybe your power forward is 6'5", but he runs the court, and you're gonna really press the opposing team's 4s and 5s because they can't run with you and they can't defend you on the perimeter. And that's kind of the way that teams have had. Butler had success that way. A lot of smaller schools have success that way. And now that's what the NBA has kind of become. And I'm looking at Zach Edey. I'm looking at DJ Burns was on nobody's radar as a draft prospect before this. And I'm sure he'll get some tryout at this point. I don't think that dude's an NBA player, to be honest with you.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't have a game that fits the NBA, unfortunately, really.
Zach Edey also doesn't, but I gotta say, a guy that's 7'4", it feels to me, a guy that's 7'4" to me feels like when, like, everybody abandoned the run and Pete Carroll ran the ball, and then everybody had all these like super agile small corners, and Pete Carroll was like, nope, I'm putting safeties at every position. We're going to press the whole time. It seems like there's a way to zig when everyone else is zagging with Zach Edey. And I looked at the 2 mock drafts today. They had him at 13. I looked at another. He was like in the second round, but I looked at a consensus big board, which is obviously the kind of shit I'm into, and you're not. I understand that. They had Zach Edey at 66, which is essentially undrafted. So even if he's 13, 14, whatever, that's like fine. I think that's like that's a lottery pick basically. So I'm not as against that, but I guess to me it's like, for a team to not be able to make a 7'4", pretty athletic dude work in some way in the modern NBA just seems like, is there no innovation?
Yeah, no, I think for Edey, he's going to be a troublesome prospect for a lot of teams as far as how he forecasts into the NBA. Because, if you think about like the true centers that are in the NBA, like think of a guy like Rudy Gobert, who's just a rim protector, a great defender. He's 7'1", but he plays bigger than that. He plays probably more like a 7'4" because he's very lengthy.
Sure.
And he can move. He's athletic. You know, the fact that but he's not a guy, he's not going to step out and drain threes on you like a lot of the 4s and 5s in the NBA now do. So, you know, if you think about like the true centers who still kind of play an old school style of center, the ones who exist in the NBA are very athletic, very mobile. And Zach Edey is, you know, he's mobile enough, he's active enough, and he dominates college because there's just not too many teams that can keep up with a 7'4" guy. But I really don't think he's quick enough for the NBA. And the fact that he's not going to step out and hit a shot for you is, you know, that really limits what you can do. I mean, this used to be, you know, if this was 15 years ago and the Sonics were still in the league, they'd make him the number 1 overall pick just because they had an infatuation with big guys. Like
he's got to be from fucking some Eastern Bloc country for them to really love him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think he's going to be an interesting player. And this is part of the reason why I'm excited to watch this matchup with NC State and DJ Burns is because, like you were just alluding to, the way teams have chosen to defend Zach Edey in most games I've ever seen him play, whether it's the tournament or the regular season or what have you, is they just swarm him with people. You know, it's like Gulliver's Travels. There's all these Lilliputians.
There we go. Good. Finally, a reference
trying
that wasn't
to take
racially
him down.
insensitive. My God.
Just really trying to hound him with a multitude of defenders at a time, because it's the only way you can stop somebody that big, especially when most college teams don't have anyone that size, you know. So it's going to be very interesting to see what NC State chooses to do. I think DJ Burns is a big enough dude size wise that he can kind of handle Zach Edey's body, but obviously when you're giving up 7 inches in the post in height, that's a lot. You know, that's going to be a lot, because if you try to front him, they're going to throw it over the top. If you try to stay behind him, you're probably going to pick up some fouls once he gets that ball inside. So it's going to be interesting to see as they fight for position, things like that. That'll be a real battle, I have to imagine, because when it comes to fighting for position, there aren't too many guys DJ Burns' size that are going to be able to move Zach Edey around. And at the same time, if you're Zach Edey, you're probably going to get frustrated with a guy that big pushing on you, you know. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, because NC State doesn't necessarily have to attack Zach Edey with a bunch of defenders like a lot of these other teams have. So it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah. I will say that Zach Edey played against a 7-footer at Duke. I can't remember.
Kyle Filipowski.
Filipowski. Is that there's a Filipowski that's like a Twitter personality, right? Political Twitter personality, because anyways. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that dude can get out and shoot a little more than Edey can. I just can't imagine.
He's much more active, yeah.
I just can't imagine that you can't find a spot for it. Like if Yao Ming, that's kind of the game, the type of game we're talking about. I'm not saying Edey is as skilled as Yao Ming was. Yao Ming was really incredibly skilled for his size. But like a guy like that, if you can't find, it just seems to me insane that no team can find a spot for a guy like that on their roster. Like change. Like even if it's just like a 25 minutes a game guy that's in there for it's alarming to me. Also, when you're 7'4", you don't have to get that far out to be able to contest a shot. You know what I mean? Like no,
that's true. I mean, the interesting thing for him, I mean, you think about like all the failed big men over the years. You know, it used to be that if you were over 7 feet, it was like an automatic that you were a first round pick. So there'd be so many of these guys that would just fail, whether it was because their bodies let them down and they got injured, or they just couldn't keep up with the game, or what have you. Now, obviously, it's such a different game overall. But, you know, a lot gets made during these games about how Zach Edey's an athlete. He grew up playing baseball. He grew up playing hockey, and only transitioned to basketball later. I think it's like they kind of confuse the fact that he's kind of this multifaceted athlete as being quick and agile, and maybe more agile than most guys his size, or even other centers at the college game. And that might be, but even when you watch him run the floor, you're like, he looks like when you'd play Madden back in the day and you had Matt Hasselbeck as your quarterback and you'd have to scramble out of the pocket and you expected him to like sprint, and then he just kind of like gallops in place for a while, and you're like, why is this guy so slow?
Yeah,
that's kind of what Edey is.
Frank Castro says, trying to listen and brew beer is tough. Can you schedule around my brew schedule? First off, I have not promoted anything this show, but on April 6th, Theoretically, I have a show at Bickerson's Brew House. It requires you to buy tickets, by the way. That's important in Ballard. So please get out and buy tickets for that. They make great beer, and I do a monthly show at their Renton location. And the Ballard location is in an incredible beer neighborhood, and you should come check it out. And then I have a couple other shows. We'll promote them on the next ones, but I'm out and about again. I took a couple weeks off after I recorded the special so that I could have some sanity, and my wife would not leave me. But now we're going back to risking the marriage every weekend.
Can we skip Penix Pro Day to do the home run game? Is that okay?
Okay, I just want to say about the Penix Pro Day real quick. So much more athletic than the national media gave him credit for. Exactly what I expected. I'm not surprised at all. Oh, Frank Castro says, sorry to interrupt your flow, as though he's talking to me at the urinal or something like that. You're good, Frank. We like the just play us in the brewery. Put us on the loudspeaker. It'll be a lot easier. Make everybody listen. Yeah, we could skip the pro day because I have a hard out in 10 minutes, and we're going to revive the home run game, which, by the way, our pal Bob Springer used to be our scorekeeper of the home run game, and he's welcome to continue to keep score, but he went and got cancer and decided it wasn't as important to him to keep score as surviving. So we had to overcome his selfishness, and we just didn't keep score. We know Alex won last year, but we're back. We're season 2. It was an insurmountable deficit, and so we are back with season 2 of the home run game, the famous, beloved home run game. Who would you like to go first, Alex?
I'll let you go first. I'll just preface the home run game by saying, if you've never heard this before, because it's been a while since we've done it.
Good call.
We're gonna give a player to the other person. It can be retired or current. Typically we do retired, but I'm actually going current today. I want you to hit a moving target right out of the gate.
Ooh, I don't like the current, but okay. All right. I'm not going current.
And the way we keep score is how far off you are from the actual number. So obviously you want to get as close to the target as you can. The farther away you are, that's going to hurt you in the standings. As Casey said, last year I paid Bob Springer $20 to crown me the winner, and he did that. So I am, I guess, all time the only champion that's ever been alive for the home run game.
One-time reigning champion. Yeah. And it's an absolute value. It's not addition and subtraction. So
right.
If you miss by you're 20 under, that's 20. If you're 20 over, that's 20 more, and that's 40. So absolute value, if anyone knows or cares what that means.
Yes. And, the interesting thing is when we started this game, we used to give each other quite a bit of detail about the length of a player's career, what there was to know about him. We would give, I would say, some favorable hints and clues to help the other person out. And along the way, we drop that all together. So now we strictly give you the name of a player, and the other person has to try and guess how many career home runs that player has.
And by the way, we are recording off of our normal time. There hasn't been a ton of comment activity today. Alex should also have his comments section on our streaming thing closed, so that he doesn't see somebody giving the answer. So feel free to play along in the comments is what I would say, because that should be somewhat interactive. I don't know if there's going to be a ton today, but feel free to play along if you want to. So you want me to tell you first, or you want me to guess first?
You tell me. Let's go. I want to know right up front.
You want to guess first. You answered that.
I want to guess first. Okay. Yes,
you keep answering this in the worst possible way.
It was like in the movie I Love You, Man, when Paul Rudd can't give a straight answer. He just stumbles all over himself. No, you give me a player. I will guess first.
Okay. Mine, I thought about this. We decided to revive this today, which was good on your part. Again, we're late to the game on everything. We decided this morning. My guy is Greg Vaughn.
Greg Vaughn. I feel like we might have had Greg Vaughn before, or at least we've talked about Greg Vaughn before. But let's give some background here. Greg Vaughn, I believe he comes up in 1990 with the Milwaukee Brewers. He was a big prospect, and I was a little kid collecting baseball cards at the time, so Greg Vaughn rookie cards were a big freaking deal, and then quickly weren't. Because he had a pretty good career. He had up and down seasons, but he was never like, he was one of those prospects that was anointed like the next Babe Ruth for whatever reason. That happened a lot in the late 80s and early 90s. And, he was a solid career though, but obviously inflated by the steroid era or the super live ball era, or whatever you want to call it. That's more PC than steroid era, because I don't think Greg Vaughn was ever specifically implicated. Big dude. I have to think his best years were in San Diego in the late 90s, and he probably played into the early part of the 2000s, but he didn't have like a super lengthy career, but he did have a lot of big home run seasons, like a lot of 40 bombs, probably a few 50 bombs in there. And even though his career wasn't as lengthy as some of the other guys of that generation, I would have to imagine he was around or maybe even surpassed 400 home runs. He's not a Hall of Famer, so I highly doubt he got to 500, but I'm going to say 415.
Okay, this is a good start for me because, and you've historically been very good. I'm impressed because to me, if you'd have told me Greg Vaughn, I would have guessed like 215. He played 15 years, starts his career 1989. First full season is 1990 with the Milwaukee Brewers. Has 128 plate appearances in 89, so got a little bit of playing time, but not a full season. Plays until 2003, ends his career with a partial season with the Rockies. My memory of him is in the early days of the Tampa Bay Rays. I believe he was their only All-Star in 2001. That's why he was on my mind, and that's towards the end of his career because his career ends in 2003. I don't remember the San Diego years for Greg Vaughn at all. The Milwaukee years, I remember just in concept, basically. But yeah, he is a four-time All-Star, got MVP votes in 2 years, fourth place both times, one-time Silver Slugger winner with 355 home runs. So you're off by 60 home runs, which is for you a pretty big miss. Usually you're like single digits, which is very fucking annoying. But
yeah, that's not great. That could have been worse. When you said it was a good start for you, I was much more worried than I am at this moment.
Where did you think? I think you were right to say that he wasn't going to have 500 home runs. So I assume you thought it was further below 415.
Yeah, I thought it was probably right around 400, and I went on the high end instead. If I would have gone on the 15 in the other direction, 385, it'd be a much lighter deficit at that moment. So here we are. That's fine.
By the way, I'm documenting this in our shared document so that we.
All right, please do. So I got a guy for you, as I said a moment ago. I am going current player today, and you're gonna have to hit a moving target. Although, as of my last check, I don't think he has hit a home run today yet, so you should be good. If you happen to get it within one, maybe we'll just give it to you and say you nailed it. But this is a guy who I'll just say his everybody knows who this is because he's current. He's a bigger dude. I would say known for hitting home runs. Left-handed hitter, Kyle Schwarber.
Ooh. So Kyle Schwarber comes up with the Chicago Cubs as like a do you remember when Dan Vogelbach came up and they were like, he could be like Kyle Schwarber? And it's like, I mean, kind of. He's a worse catcher and a worse outfielder. They just both have squatty bodies. But it's even
it's like when every white receiver gets compared to like Wes Welker, and you're like, this is not Wes Welker.
Yeah. It'll be like 6'3" dork, and he's Julian Edelman for some reason. Kyle Schwarber, and Kyle Schwarber has played, I believe, he could be playing for a different team this year, but he played for the Cubs, the Phillies, and I think the Guardians. No.
I'll give you the teams because it doesn't really matter. It's irrelevant. But he's played for the Nationals and the Red Sox in addition to those other two you mentioned.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's, a lot of red and blue. I guess that's a lot of teams though.
That is.
I bet you peak season I'm going like somewhere like 36 or 41 home runs. God, probably made his debut in like 2015 is my guess. There were some years he's like not a full-time catcher. Man. I'm going 190 home runs, and I'm going to kill myself. I can already feel it.
Okay, that's not terrible. That you went on the low end, which I thought for sure you were going to go high end with him because last couple of years he's had some really great seasons. Last year he hits 47 home runs, which is his highest total ever. The year before that he had 46, which to then was his highest total. So the last 2 seasons, I think there's this like recency bias with Kyle Schwarber where you're like, man, this is a prolific home run hitter. But you were right. In previous seasons, he kind of had some inconsistencies. 2021, I guess he has 32, but 2020 in the COVID year, he only has 11, which makes sense. He had 38 in 2019, 26 in 2018.
Ooh,
30
I feel
in
like I'm going to be
2017.
way low based on what you're saying.
No, you're not. So the number, I'll give you the total number. It's 247 as of right now, and that's including the 1 home run he's hit this season. So you said, what did you say, 190?
Yeah, I said 190. So I think I'm technically I'm ahead by
closer.
like 3 home runs.
You're ahead by a little bit. You're about 57 away. So yeah, not bad. Yeah, like I said, I'm surprised you went on the low end, which makes me worried that you would have come closer if you actually would have like bought into that theory even more. But I thought you were going to say like 300 something or so. But yeah, he's obviously had a pretty good career for himself, and at times he's not much of an average hitter. I mean, this guy is home run or bust. He's like a Matt Stairs, some of those other big hitters that we've talked about in the past. But yeah, overall, I'd say for bringing this back for the first time in months, we both did about what we'd expect. There's obviously room to grow here. Could have been worse. Could have been worse, but we did okay.
Could have been much worse. All right. The Casey McLean on Twitter, Casey McLean Comedy everywhere else. Please come see me do comedy. I desperately need you to be there. Let me, real quick, I'm going to pull up my calendar and see if I can ring off a couple dates. I actually have a Crowdwork show. No, I'm hosting the Door Guy show at Tacoma Comedy Club on Sunday, which is a really cool show they're doing for this is like how I came through the comedy club system, is helping them with stuff for not enough money. And these guys are doing that. And so you can come see some of the next Casey McLean's performing at Tacoma Comedy Club. Very funny dudes, by the way. And some ladies. And then the Crowdwork show at Tacoma Comedy Club, April 14th. And then I'll be in Idaho and Spokane Comedy Club, April 21st. April 20th, I will be at a vape shop in Idaho where weed is illegal. I don't smoke weed, and they only sell tobacco vapes. So that'll be fun. Draft Zone in Post Falls, Idaho. Also Hitler's birthday. I don't know if you knew that 420 and Hitler's birthday always.
I didn't realize that. You kept tabs on that, but
listen. If I'm going to do a podcast with you based on the rest of this.
You'll be in Idaho, so that's a good.
Guess which one they're celebrating there.
To bring in. Yeah.
Guess which one they're celebrating.
Well, I've heard a lot about Idaho, so yeah.
All right, and you're Alex SSN everywhere. Please subscribe on YouTube. Eventually, we'll just stop doing this everywhere else and force you to watch on YouTube. But for now, if you go on YouTube and click on the notification bell, you'll know exactly when we go live, and be able to interact and comment. And we post clips up there and shit too. So. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you. I guess I'll talk to the rest of everybody but Alex next in 2 days. So
I'll talk to you when I talk to you.
No, we're kicking him off the podcast. All right. Bye, everybody. Hold on. We got to get this thing up. And oh, wait. Start it over. Start over song. Here we go.
Really struggled with the song today.